Hey, Riverland College. English major Jeff Johnson here to present the last video that we're going to have this week, lesson-wise. And it is September 3rd. I'm trying to make them the day before you need them down there. So I think I'll let this upload all night and you should have it by the morning. On this date, just as kind of a preamble, there's quite a few things on my mind, and I'll just have to try to concentrate because you need a good English class today, or at least a facsimile of an English class. And I'm trying to keep doing my best here. This date, first and foremost for me, is a solemn one. This is the day that I observed the death of my father. He's been sleeping in the earth since, I think, 2012 or so. And I wasn't there. I didn't time it properly. I was teaching a Comp 1 at Brainerd when the phone fluttered, and it was my no-good sister letting me know that he had gone supernova, just shy of his 81st birthday. My mama lives on. State of Minnesota, no husband has a chance to outlive their wife. And that is truer in the county I live in, Stearns County. In Stearns County, you could Google this, well, at least a couple of years ago, no other county in the United States do women live as long as this one. So I don't have a chance, but I'm trying to run and eat organic food and take at least a shot at it, so I'm within striking range. I didn't plan to talk that long about that. We also are looking at Labor Day weekend, which means a couple of things. I won't have a lesson for you Monday because it's Labor Day. So I get a chance to catch my breath and get caught up on the student writing I'm definitely behind on now. I'm working 8-hour days for the first time in my life, trying to keep up with everything, making, among other things, content for you, videos for you. We also have, we're kind of at the precipice where, in which most public schools are going to go back to some kind of model next week after Labor Day. And we are cautious about that and kind of holding our breath and hoping in the pandemic that it all goes okay. And some of it's going to go well, and a lot of it is not going to go well in a lot of districts. We can just see that from around the country, but let's be hopeful and keep our chin up. I just read a bitter Facebook posting by a former colleague of mine named Chris at my old high school. She's exhausted. She's only 4 days in, and I think I told you this, in my old high school, teachers didn't get any option whatsoever. Their options were teach live, take a year of unpaid leave, or quit. Well, she's pretty upset about that, and upset further that the kids at my old high school, St. John's Prep, got all kinds of options. They could come to school, they could do it remotely, or a mashup of both. And my heart today is truly with my brothers and sisters, the tens of thousands of elementary, middle school, and high school teachers across this great state of Minnesota, the greatest state in the world. And they're scared. Many of them are afraid and nervous and depressed. And I'm trying to do the half class full thing like me. And I just heard on Minnesota Public Radio, they were interviewing teachers, and one of them said, well, you know what, this is going to be the year that's going to have to be just good enough, the good enough year. I'm sorry, I'm not shaking my fist at her, or maybe I am. That's a fatal stance. The good enough year, we've all got to go for it. From here to Austin, Minnesota, we've just got to go and create the best educational experience we can have. And I've told you, I'm going for it. Here's proof. We started unboxing my incoming equipment yesterday in front of Classical Mythology. This is for you. Look at this baby. This is a Canon EOS RP camera. It's got a couple of lenses. I got 2 cameras coming, but this one is exclusively for you because I really want to make high quality videos that look good, that can be used by you or maybe other people if I can be smart enough once in a while. These Sennheiser lavalier mics came. so I can sound good. And I think the monitor came today, and there's another box, but we won't know until we unbox it tomorrow at noon during classical mythology. And I'm not even to the poem yet. I guess I'm still stuck in my prelude, aren't I? 5 minutes in. I just gotta be less self-conscious about filming myself. One more stray thought that I have today in my mind is how I'm a little bit out of balance in my life in a particular way. You know, as a 60-year-old dude, I'm not a technophobic Luddite. There's parts of me that's always liked technology and always liked gadgets. And I have, there's a back and forthness. I usually talk about this on my Comp 2s in January. And you do the same thing, I think, but me probably a little bit more acutely. There's a back and forthness between my analog life and my digital life. And it's always felt in balance to me. I mean, examples would be like I've got a Bose radio that sounds great, but I also have a 1956 Telefunken 8. It's huge. It's a radio with tubes in it. It was formerly the radio of a Minnesota writer that people are forgetting about. A great one, J.F. Powers. That radio is analog. It's not stereo, and yet it's the greatest sounding radio in my house. I have a couple of guitar amps. I have an old tube amp, a Fender Champ, Super Champ from the early 80s that has glowing tubes in the back. And I also have a Voxtronic 80, which is a digital amp that can make all kinds of different sounds. I love my vinyl collection, and I also love my digital music collection that would shock you. I'm on about 3.5 terabytes, like 3.7 terabytes of music. Do you have any idea how much music that is, classical and jazz-wise? And but the pandemic has me tilted fairly acutely towards the virtual world, way of living in the world, the digital world. And I'm just going to have to get used to that. The poem that I want to kick things off with today is by a man named Kai Carson-Wee. Now, sometimes poetry runs in families, like blonde hair or freckles or whatever. But sometimes poetry is a thing in a family. And I'm thinking of Kai Carson-Wee and his brother, Anders Carson-Wee. These are Minnesota boys, and they are young, and they are cool. And they grew up in Morris, Minnesota, where the sky's big. And when they were kids, they were major athletes. You kind of tell that from this. They were like, renowned skateboarders when they were like 9th, 10th graders. There's videos up that prove that. In this video, I don't do this very often. This is a poem that Kai Carson-Wee wrote, but it's also accompanied, or it's presented rather, I feel like I'm not speaking well, in a film that I find really beautiful. And ordinarily, I don't do this because, if you're reading a poem about a cow, for instance, you don't need a cow on the opposite page to help you think about the poem. Your imagination should do some work, but this poem mashes up some things that I love. I love Minnesota. I love our lakes. I love loons. Mine left a little earlier this year than usual. They become domesticated. They swim around my little boat underneath it. They become my friends, and they're gone already. And I love Alumacraft boats. Maybe you're like that too. And I got one, kind of. I don't want to talk about that right now. Anyway, here's Kai Carson-Wee. This is gorgeous.
Cry of the Loon. When the sun gets low on the cedars behind me, I paddle the fishing boat out to the drop-off and wait for the deepening light. Mosquitoes fly lazily over the oarlocks. Clouds turn purple and darken to gold. Sailboats drift under eddies of stalled wind, and loons call wildly out from the cattails, sending their terrifying cries to the night. We must remember the blue of the water is only the surface reflecting the sky. The weight of our bodies, the leftover seed of some violent burn at the core. The rails run out, but the wheels keep turning. The fire goes down, but the winter keeps pushing its sap to the towering pines. We see through the window, but don't hear the chorus of waves coming down on the sand. The bodies of sailors and freight liners drag down, sea creatures yet to be born. We are not put on earth to remember the dead. We are not given access to ways we will suffer, what light might become us, or how it will end. We are given a few dreams, a few nights of wonder, a whisper, a shiver, a miracle chance to be held in another one's arms. The day goes on fading. The night goes on beating its drums to the hideaway stars. We are given a few years to laugh at the danger, to break ourselves down in the service of joy. And then we are floating. The water is black, and our quiet Alumacraft fishing boat carries us further and further from shore.
One of the great lines in that poem, I think, was how does it go? We are only given a few years to laugh at the danger. I hope that made you happy. So let's get back to your rhetorical training. And I've got a little chalkboard here, and I was gonna try to use it, but I think it's just too awkward. The setup is I couldn't be MacGyvering this in a more hilarious way. I've got a chalkboard here that we used when we homeschooled the boys. My wife homeschooled both our sons. I wouldn't have trusted myself to it. They came out, they're almost normal. It's amazing. And I thought I had a chalkboard, actually a big whiteboard coming that I'm gonna mount on the wall of my study. That's where most of my drawing will be going on. I even got a little Lego guy propping this phone forward a little bit. You can't see him, of course. It's a Batman Lego. His arms are over the top of one of the last little vids I'll be shooting with my iPhone 11. But there's some more things that I want to tell you about rhetoric this week. When we last were together, I told you some origin stories. And that was not a definitive explanation. We're a little more complicated than 3 stories. But I promised you that I would move you into a century that I'm kind of obsessed with, and a place. That's 5th century Athens. And that's where so many great men that I owe serious debts to. They have structured my consciousness. On one end, like I think I mentioned the other day, we have the great philosophers. We have Socrates, who begat Plato, who begat Aristotle. And we have also the men, I'm sorry, it was mainly dudes, who gave us Greek tragedy. And here I'm talking about Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides and a comedian who wrote hilarious plays that were also kind of naughty, Aristophanes. I just love thinking about this. I just love thinking about locales, places, contexts where a bunch of brilliant people just suddenly find themselves together, inspiring each other, and that's definitely the case. And here's the main thing I'd like to put before you today. Corax was just mainly about getting some farmers ready to appear before those elders so they could get their land back or get the lines of demarcation between their properties established properly. But 3 centuries later, right, cities have sprouted up along rivers and civilization was definitely getting going. We can trace some of our demos, our democracy, to Athenians because they figured out that that's how things should be run. Let's vote. Let's decide together by a vote how we want to govern ourselves, how we want our society and our culture structured. And there was rhetoric, the study of rhetoric, ready to serve and to be enlisted. And we're back to that idea from that old professor of mine that 3 is the magic number. I have, there's 3 places where rhetoric was very, very important. I'm kind of in this election season that I'm just trying to look away from, like any car crash. And I've already told you, we're not going to have a political class. I told all of my students, we're not even going to discuss it. But and here I am discussing it. In this election season, one of the things I have to admit to you is that early on, rhetorical training was dreamed into being to create bureaucrats, right? They knew early on, the Greeks, that if you could walk into a room, into maybe even a dangerous situation and speak well, you'd be in charge. You'd be driving the truck. And I'm just saying that in a general way. This is still true today. But just very quickly, we don't have to get too detailed about it. You've heard of this before. Rhetoric had 3 places of applications, so 3 venues, so to speak. And the first one was politics. They had elected officials. They had people who wanted to be in charge. There's always people that want to be administrators, and there's always people that want to be led. And we've always needed people to be administrators. And I'm thinking of all the administrators in my life, the ones at Riverland College, the ones at Central Lakes College. It's just how we organize ourselves hierarchically. And speaking generally, politics has always been a place where rhetoric has been important. You can't get elected to any kind of office, local, state, federal, national, whatever, unless you can make arguments on behalf of yourself. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about or studying politicians. I believe in poets. I look to them to solve my problems. I cannot name a single personal problem I've had in my life that's been solved by a politician. They're all liars. Well, not all of them. Up at my college up north, where there's a wonderful man named Steve Wenzel who's teaching live classes at 72. I got to call him and say, dude, you got to get out of that classroom. He's fearless. He was a state representative for years, and now he's a professor of government at my main job. He's not a liar. I take that back. All politicians are liars except for Professor Steve Wenzel. That's what I want to go on the record saying. The second place where rhetoric was and has been important for 25 centuries is forensics, which is the fancy word, or law, right? Now, I hope none of you ever get in trouble and need a lawyer. But if you do, that's going to be a rhetorical need that you're going to have. You might need somebody to defend you in a court, or you might need an attorney to help you merge a corporation someday if you ever become like a CEO or something. I have no idea. that's area number 2. Pretty obvious, right? And I think one distinction to make between these 2 first areas is that politicians are always talking about the future. Almost always, a politician is talking about the future. They're talking about the things that they're promising us, that they'll do for us. And right now, the men running for the presidency of the United States, hard to remember their names, they're making one promise after another. And law is different. Lawyers are usually dealing with something from the past, something that's already happened. So theoretically, they could be dealing with the future, but if you are, they're usually dealing with the past. Now, my favorite area of the 3, so we got this down, right? We got law, we got politics, and the third one is a very fancy word that I suck at spelling, and I'm not even going to try it. That word is epidietic. And epidietic, and by the way, all of this is right out of book 1 of Aristotle's Rhetoric. Maybe book 2, I got to pick that up and review. This is Aristotelian thinking, right? Aristotle allowed for a very large catch-all place that he called epidietic, and the word that you know, that you're more familiar with, is the ceremonial. All right, ceremonial rhetorical moments happen when people get together for particular kinds of reasons. And if I were in a classroom right now, I would say, give me an example of a ceremonial speech. Pretty quickly, students get going. Since many of them have just recently graduated from high school, the first thing that comes to mind is the commencement address. Now I'm a little bit sad. One of my jobs, one of the things that I do at Central Lakes College that I don't get paid for, it's just self-assigned service for the college. Adam Marcotte, who directs our honors program, the biggest one in the state, by the way, he figured out years ago that I'm a genius at getting, or not a genius, pretty good at getting speakers prepared. And that is my thing in the spring at CLC. And this spring, of course, it was virtual. But my goodness, when it's a regular year, it's been 10 years in a row where I take the speakers at the Staples campus and the Brainerd campus, because I coached high school speech for 19 years. It's just in my blood. It's just something I do. It's in my line. I really get those speakers ready. And that's a big deal. Getting a young person, maybe an 18 or 19-year-old person, ready to speak in a gym that's got 2,200 people staring at him, trash fire code year after year after year. That's ceremonial. A commencement address is ceremonial. I'm always sad on the last day at my college because we always have retirement speeches. That too is epidietic or ceremonial. Usually takes us 3 hours to retire 4 or 5 people. And we're bawling and stuff and looking at key, presentations. But all state colleges in the Mid-State system, it's like Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you could never leave. So I've just seen this a million times. People give a retirement speech and then they're back the next year teaching, phasing out, taking 3-4 years to say goodbye to this work that we all love so much. People go to that college and they don't leave, except Soderlund, Professor Soderlund in the English department. He pontooned out of there at the age of 67, never looked back. It's like, are you kidding me? You're not phasing? I went straight to his lake home. I always bring up wedding speeches. People usually think of that, right? My son got married a year and a month ago, roughly. And that was $40,000 wedding. Can you imagine that? Jeepers cripes. I only had to write a check for $15,000 because his beautiful bride, her dad is knocked out loaded, so he was kind to me. But obviously at a wedding, we've been there, right? You're sitting there at the wedding and you're eating and it's the feast. It's just so ancient. And we hear the tinkling of the glasses. Well, we usually want a couple things to happen when the glasses tinkle. We want the bride and groom to kiss again and again because it's kind of a fertility rite. And we also want to hear speeches. We want to hear speeches. We want the best man to get up and give a speech. And that was my son, Will. Jeffy chose him as his best man. He did a pretty good job. I didn't give a speech at that wedding. I read a prayer that I'd written because our priest couldn't go. He had another wedding. It's obvious. It's just, I knocked my ring against this table, sorry. Very, very simple. And I'm never going to do it again, I don't think. But we also have a habit of a ritual of speaking well of the dead at funerals. That's called panegyric. And I won't do it at my mom's funeral. She's going to go, and I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to give a little speech at the end of the Mass. I did that for my dad, though, and the problem there is giving a speech about you're wild with grief. People attempt it. At least I'm an experienced public speaker, but that's when priests or ministers or reverends get really nervous, man. When a relative attempts ceremoniously to speak well of someone who's sitting there laying there in the coffin. Actually, they're usually laying. They're wild with grief. They're no good at speaking in public, and every time they turn whoever's dead, their beloved relative, into a saint. We do that, and it's a mistake. So that's about as far as we need to take that. It's easy, right? Rhetoric historically has had three important places in our living and our marrying and our dying. We need lawyers. We kind of need politicians, administrators, and we also, when we want to get together once in a while to retire someone or watch people get married or do a funeral thing, retirement speech. There's always a Boy Scout in the room, like an Eagle Scout, that brings up the speech that they got to give when they become a Life Scout. I want to end with a question, and this is like seriously weak because I'm using this little chalkboard. I found this in the garage, covered with dust, and I'm dreaming that by the time we get together again, next week, Wednesday, is when you're going to see your next video lesson from me. My son's coming this weekend with his beautiful wife and their little French bulldog Wilbur, and he's going to show me hopefully how to, just the basics, the bare bones about how to run this gear. And hopefully the GoPro Hero 8 will be here by then so I can do lessons out on the pontoon. But just today, put up with this chalkboard and answer me this. We're going to start building a model here, and it's going to get a little bit more complicated and a little bit more abstract as your rhetorical training continues. But here's the deal. Whenever I write a V on a blackboard, and I got a fantastic blackboard in my classroom up north, I hate those whiteboards. I'm talking about a voice. I'm talking about a voice. It could be a speaker or it could be a writer. And generally, when I write an A on the board, I'm talking about this A stands for audience. None of this is hard. An audience could be a reader. It could also be a hearer. It could be someone listening. Now, right now I'm speaking and you are listening. And again, this is going to get a little bit more complicated as we move through it. But today I just want to put one thing before you, one question. And I want you to think about it a little bit. And how you answer the question is going to kind of classify you, how you think about things. In between the voice and the audience here, I've put a little thing called the truth that is important to me. And the basic question is this. When two people are talking, who owns the truth? Might it be the responsibility of the voice to tell the truth? Or might it be the responsibility, might the onus be on the audience to perceive the truth? Like, who owns it? And you're smart. You guys are smart, and you're already fighting through the dualism. You're going, well, wait a minute. Isn't it both? Well, kind of and kind of not. And finishing this idea off, I think is going to take our time together next Wednesday. Who's in charge of the truth? The speaker or the hearer? The writer or the reader? This question seems simple. We've been trying to answer this for centuries, century after century after century. And this is probably enough of a YouTube lesson for you today. Have a fantastic Labor Day weekend. We're nervous about all the social gathering that's going to happen because of the holiday weekend, and we got school starting up, and let's just hope everything's okay. We're all okay in the end, right? You know that, don't you? See you soon.